welcome to the RugbyBase. I'm your host, Andrew, and I'm joined here by Kyle and Jonathan, and we're here to discuss and debate all things rugby with you. And today I want to talk to you two specifically about an article that came out from Ian Payton of the Daily Telegraph about a possible shake-up of Super Rugby and its structuring when the new TV right contract comes up for renewal in 2016. It's interesting since the last TV deal changed the competition landscape significantly, and it seems we're going to see it happen again. Kyle, upon reading the article about the possible restructuring and changes to the competition, such as cutting South Africa out of the Super Rugby completely for a trans-Tasman competition, how do you think this will affect the dynamic of Super Rugby?
I'd just like to say a big hello to our viewers. I'm really happy and grateful to have this opportunity to talk rugby. I love rugby, I always have. So let's go, let's hit it out. I think one of the big concerns for me is that it's going to, especially for Australian players, they're going to lose the extra incentive to sign with Australian rugby franchises because they'll no longer have South Africa as the destination to play. Not with when you've got as Australia, not so much New Zealand. I suppose New Zealand, but they have AFL and the NRL as massive competitors in the market. The travelling factors as well, they will no longer be an issue. Tours will have they'll have no such effect on players, such as being injured and being able to back up. A pure example of that is with the Brumbies. The Brumbies have to go from Canberra to Pretoria to play the Bulls and then back up to Waikato in the final, the Super Rugby final, which if you guys watched the last 20 minutes of that game, they really faltered.
Oh, they were done.
They were tired. They were completely done. Yeah, exactly right. And we could also find South Africa struggle when it comes to playing the championship, especially outside South Africa when they play Australia and New Zealand on their home grounds. The struggle for pace and being able to keep up with the Trans-Tasman players as Super Rugby, I think, is one. It's just a step above the Currie Cup, which is what South Africa's second tier of rugby is. So, all those issues aside, I think it could be some testing times.
It's very valid points you raised there, Kyle. And Jonathan, what do you think of this?
I think you've touched on some very good points there, Kyle. And hello to all our viewers again. I too am very happy to be here and to talking rugby with Kyle and Andrew. Just with that last point you made there, Kyle, about that tier of rugby, I agree with you completely. I mean, the Currie Cup is seen as more of a youth thing these days, and if you lose, if you do lose that level, as you did say, it does leave a gap for South African rugby that has to make up its own. And when you talk about the differing styles of New Zealand and Australia and all those teams, they do bring different styles to the front. So if you're not playing against different styles, like in that Super Rugby level, you're going to be missing out, and it's going to show on an international level.
Exactly. Yep.
And I mean, the other thing that comes to the mind is we all know that in SANZAAR, the TV revenue, like that's in sports today, TV revenue is the money outside of sponsorship, and South Africa is where the money is in SANZAAR, as we saw from the latest, from the last contract they signed in 2011. South Africa got huge more money out of it.
They've got such a huge viewer base in South Africa.
Yeah, exactly.
In New Zealand and in Australia.
They don't have the competition from League or NRL, which is huge in Australia.
Yeah, so, I mean those are all factors, and then that also because that money would then trickle back to SANZAAR, that money is now gone. Like that audience is gone until the Rugby Championship comes. So there's no incentive now for a South African viewer to go and watch an Australia and New Zealand team play in Super Rugby because there's their team's no longer part of it, and because the teams are no longer part, I think we're going to lose those rivalries. I think. Super Rugby has gotten some great rivalries over the years. You think of, you see now with the Bulls coming to fruition, over the past, 6 or 7 years. We saw them, they've had a couple of good contests against the Crusaders. And, I look forward to seeing the Bulls play the Crusaders every year, as a result. And I think you lose that once you, remove South Africa from that level of competition.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got the Reds and the Sharks. I'm a Reds man, you're a Sharks boy, so it's suck. And they've got quite a rivalry going in my eyes. Especially it's the end of the last final where you guys beat us in Queensland. So
it was a heated affair. Yeah.
I mean, it was a good game.
No Quade.
It was a good game as well. I mean, and we lose that. I mean, we lose that That and I think to me that would be a shame for the rugby in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's not all lost though, because originally South Africa wants to add a sixth team into the competition with the whole promotion relegation thing going on with the Southern Kings and the Lions. So the article also does mention that they might consider adding more teams as well, but from countries such as Japan and Argentina. What are your thoughts on these inclusions, Kyle, and what's your opinion on how it will change Super Rugby?
Well, I'll touch on the Japanese. That if a Japanese team was brought into the competition, I think that's massive. Now, Japan have their own a rugby tournament in Japan, but the big names that they've been able to pull from Super Rugby and even in the European leagues are just huge. I mean, we've got JP Peterson, a former Sharks boy, played for South Africa. He's playing in Japan now. We've got George Smith, again, another big name, and I think having a team from Japan would be just fantastic, because you just get a piece of that pie that Japan is bringing. Now that's big money.
That's true.
And I think in the next couple of years, they could become big powerhouses within the Super Rugby environment.
And we think about including the minor nations in, it is an issue that needs to be sorted in World Rugby, and this could be a way to do that.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, even with Argentina, having an Argentina side playing out of Argentina, you'd bring some of their European playing players back to Southern Hemisphere rugby, which can only be great and successful for their championship aspirations, their rugby championship aspirations, as they are the new fourth team in the championship. Just starting last year, I saw a lot of promise there.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it would not only it would add more revenue to Super Rugby to the other countries such as New Zealand, if South Africa stays on board, and Australia, and I think more importantly, it'll strengthen the national sides of Japan and Argentina, having that extra revenue to add to youth and their players. I think it's a good thing for World Rugby. I really do.
I agree 100% on that.
Absolutely, and Jonathan, with obviously if they do add extra teams, this is going to raise huge issues with the June tests. The Super Rugby competition will continue longer. It will go into June. What are we going to do with the June tests? How are we going to sort that out?
Well, I'm going to start off the bat here, Andrew, by saying that I think all three of us here agree that the June test window, aside from that the Lions tour, it's stupid. Why is it there?
Mm.
Exactly. We've got a World Cup. We've got the European tour. I don't know if we need a window.
It makes no sense to me, and we've discussed this many times before. Is that June test window? It makes the players are complaining now about how much rugby they play, and I think the biggest thing to show it is now we've got guys like McCaw and Conrad Smith. We're seeing it in New Zealand rugby especially, is these older players now wanting to keep playing rugby for their country, but having to take time off from Super Rugby seasons, and Conrad Smith wants to take time off from the spring tour, and I think there's just too much rugby in the calendar year.
10 months a year they're playing now.
Exactly. And if you bring in these, I want to see these teams from Japan and Argentina, as both of you do as well.
Mm.
And to do that, I just don't want that June window there anymore. I think that it can be played for Super Rugby. We can get Super Rugby out of the way quicker. We don't have to have a break in the middle. And that'll leave that there should be a nice gap between the end of a Super Rugby competition and when the Rugby Championship starts.
Exactly. I completely agree.
I just want to add a point in here, and I think we can see it clearly with the Lions tour this year, how it disrupts the chemistry of a team, especially when the Wallabies went into camp and a majority of players from the franchises, went into the Wallabies camp, and then, like for example, when the Brumbies first came back in together, went down to the Force because it didn't look like there was any chemistry within the team because they hadn't played with each other for 3 weeks.
New systems, yep.
Yeah, so when you lose that, especially if a team's on a roll, and then all of a sudden it's stopped, we're going to have an international break.
It does stop the momentum for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly right. The Brumbies struggled, and I truly believe if they hadn't been able to get past that first week in the finals against the Cheetahs, they would have been knocked out.
It was close.
It was very, very close. that could add on to the travelling and stuff. It's just the test window to me needs to go, and it needs to go now. Just so we can have a better Super Rugby, and then we can have an excellent championship and spring tour. I think.
Interesting times certainly ahead for Southern Hemisphere Rugby. Whichever way Sandside chooses to go, come 2016, there's certainly going to be challenges moving forward. Certainly ones you two highlighted earlier. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the RugbyBase. If you like the video, please subscribe, share, and please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. All details below in the description. Cheers.